Have you ever been completely infuriated by a massive institution?
Oh, absolutely.
Or like one of those giant tech platforms, you know, the ones that
Yeah.
stand behind a shiny corporate logo and claim to be just a neutral tool.
Right, or they say they're just offering a public space.
Exactly. Yet somehow they hold this immense, undeniable power over your daily life, your business, your ability to even communicate with your own family.
Yeah, and the moment something goes wrong, it's impossible to fix.
You try to find a human to talk to, a person to actually hold accountable for a decision that, ruined your week, and you just hit a wall.
Just an endless labyrinth of automated responses.
Yes. Chatbot loops and vague policy updates.
It's universally maddening, isn't it? You get the distinct feeling of being managed by a ghost.
Managed by a ghost. That is exactly what it feels like.
Right, because you feel the concrete effects of the decisions being made, like your account gets flagged, or your bank transfer gets held.
Or a medical claim gets denied.
Exactly, but you can't locate the physical entity making those calls. The authority is everywhere, pressing down on you, but the responsibility is completely diffused.
Like shadow boxing with a bureaucracy that refuses to admit it's even in the ring with you.
That's a great way to put it.
Well, if you have ever felt that frustration, you are in the exact right place today, because our mission for this deep dive is to tear into a completely revolutionary, paradigm-shifting framework.
It really is a massive shift in thinking.
It's called the Accountability Gated Systems Model, or AGS, and we're sourcing this from a highly detailed working draft known as Harshal Systems, the Collector's Edition.
Along with all its associated technical specifications and patent filings, yeah.
Right. But we really need to emphasize up front what this document actually is, because it's dense.
It is very dense.
Latte.
But it's profoundly clarifying because of what it refuses to do.
What do you mean?
Well, we aren't going to talk about morality today. We aren't going to debate ethics or, what values an AI or a tech CEO should have.
Oh, thank goodness. I'm so tired of that debate.
Right. The text explicitly ignores all of that. We are going to look purely at structural behavior. Observable mechanical facts.
So we're looking at the architecture of power itself.
Precisely.
Okay, so the absolute core of this entire framework, the gravitational center we will keep orbiting today, is accountability.
Yes. Accountability is everything here.
But I need to stop us right there because, accountability has become such a cheap corporate buzzword.
Right, totally.
It's usually what a CEO says on an apology tour after they've already leaked the data of 50 million people. We take accountability.
Yeah, as if saying the word magically fixes the breach.
Right. But this framework uses the word totally differently, doesn't it? We are talking about accountability as the foundational physics of how systems should even be allowed to operate.
That's the pivot. In most of the systems running our world right now, accountability is a reactive patch. It's a cleanup crew.
Like an afterthought.
Exactly. You build the system, you let it run fast and break things, and then when someone gets hurt, you try to figure out who is to blame.
Which is usually no one.
Right. But the AGS framework argues something radical. It says accountability has to be a first-class constraint.
A first-class constraint, like gravity in a physics simulation.
Or electricity in a circuit.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not a feature you add later. It must occupy the exact same design tier as safety limits, physical hardware constraints, or memory capacity.
Wow.
If it doesn't exist, the system physically cannot run.
I am so ready to get into this because it changes how you look at everything.
It really does.
By the end of this deep dive, you, listening right now, are going to have a completely new mental toolkit.
A very powerful one.
You're going to be able to evaluate every platform, every government agency, every AI system you interact with using this visually striking, undeniable logic. You won't ever have to argue with a PR department again.
Because PR becomes irrelevant when you just observe the system's structural behavior.
Okay, so to understand how we get to that point, we need to start at the foundational gate itself, right?
Yeah, the text outlines the basic architecture of an accountability-gated system.
And the purpose of this model isn't to build a system that automatically trusts everything it sees, is it?
No, not at all. It's designed to establish a rigorous mechanical method for identifying an input, recording its exact provenance, and bounding its permitted scope.
And most importantly, verifying a clear, unbroken path of human accountability before a single action is taken.
Exactly, before anything happens.
So let's unpack this gate, because it's not just a theoretical concept. The source material lays out 5 mandatory, non-negotiable questions.
5 questions that every AGS must answer for any input it receives.
And this applies whether the input is like a line of code, a legal document, a click on a user interface, or a complex prompt from an AI, right?
The format doesn't matter. The first question the system has to answer is simply, what is it?
Just identifying what's at the door.
Right. This means identifying the input type, the structural format, and its declared purpose. Is this input a command meant to execute?
Or is it just a piece of reference data sitting in a file?
Or maybe a request to allocate server resources?
Okay, getting the basic lay of the land. Then, question 2, where did it come from?
Provenance. This is all about provenance.
So the system has to record the source and the transmission context. Like, did this data packet come from a verified internal server with a known IP address?
Or did it float in from some unauthenticated external connection?
Right. Which naturally leads to the most critical hurdle, question 3. Who is accountable for it?
Yes. The system has to associate that input with a verified human being or a highly specific organizational role.
This is especially true if the input is requesting an action, right?
Absolutely. It is never enough for the system to say, oh, the computer algorithm generated this request.
The framework demands to know which human is standing behind the algorithm.
Exactly. You have to point to a person.
And once we know who is actually asking, we hit question 4. What may it affect?
This is about defining the permitted scope. What's the duration of the action?
What downstream systems might this command reach?
Right. It's essentially bounding the blast radius of whatever's about to happen.
Bounding the blast radius. I love that. And finally, question 5 establishes the ultimate structural failsafe. What happens when certainty is insufficient?
This is crucial. If the system cannot answer the first 4 questions with absolute mathematical clarity, it is forced into a specific state.
It must preserve the record of the attempt, and then it must halt, defer, or request human clarification.
It must never, under any circumstances, invent authority to keep moving.
Okay, I want to play with this because it's a brilliant mechanism. It's not like a firewall. A firewall just scans for known viruses and blocks bad code.
Right.
This framework acts more like a nightclub bouncer, but a bouncer who doesn't just check your ID to see if you're old enough.
Oh, this bouncer demands a lot more than that.
Yeah. This bouncer demands to know exactly who you are, who specifically invited you, what exact section of the club you're allowed to stand in, how many minutes you plan to stay, and exactly which human being is financially responsible for your bar tab before you even step foot inside.
That is a perfect analogy.
And if you shrug and say, I don't know who's paying, the bouncer doesn't negotiate. They just stand there and say, no entry.
The bouncer analogy works perfectly, especially because of a vital distinction the text makes right at this point. The difference between recognition and authorization.
Oh, yes. The text was so explicit about this.
Just because a bouncer recognizes your face or knows you're a celebrity doesn't mean you have the authority to walk in and start rearranging the furniture.
Exactly. It said that just because a system recognizes references to a public event, or like parses a legal term, or detects the presence of confidential information, that recognition is not permission to use it.
And that is a massive trap in modern tech. A system might scan an email and recognize that it contains highly sensitive personal medical data.
And modern tech companies often assume that because the system can read it, the system can process it.
Right. The AGS framework says absolutely not. Recognition is not authorization.
So things like encryption, identity verification, access logging.
All of those things support accountability, but none of them substitute for a legitimate mandate to act.
Hold on, let me get this straight. So if a massive AI scrapes the entire internet and it recognizes a billion copyrighted images,
Yes.
under this framework, the ability to recognize and ingest those images gives it exactly 0 authority to train on them or generate new images based on them.
Exactly 0. Unless it can trace an unbroken line of human accountability back to whoever's authorizing that specific action.
Wow.
That's the structural reality. Without that line of accountability, the system is acting on unrecognized authority, which the framework defines as illegitimate force.
Illegitimate force. Okay, so if accountability is the strict gate that every action must pass through, how do we actually classify the institutions, the corporations, and the systems that are walking through that gate?
This brings us to the visual language of the framework.
Which might be my favorite part of the entire document. It's so beautifully visual. The text introduces the ground zero phase principle.
And the visual language here is key because it cuts through all the legal jargon. The golden rule of this ground zero principle is one phase, always clear.
Meaning any public-facing institution, platform, or system operates in exactly one phase at any given moment.
You cannot be a hybrid. And critically, the declared phase, what the PR department says you are, must match the observed structural behavior.
And if your behavior contradicts your declaration.
The framework triggers an automatic reclassification.
And what I love is that this isn't about shutting them down or throwing tech executives in jail.
No, the text explicitly says, no enforcement, no accusation of malice, no shutdown only, label correction.
It just forces you to wear the right name tag.
Yeah.
And these labels are represented by 3 irreducible phases, what the text calls phase badges of power.
They are visually represented as an ice cube, a drop of water, and a cloud or a bank of fog.
Let's break down exactly what each of these means in the structural architecture of power, starting with the most restricted, the ice cube.
Right. The text calls this the NAB, or neural atomic body.
But let's stick with the ice cube for the visual. It represents a system that is refusal-bound. What does that actually look like in the real world?
An ice cube system operates entirely on external legitimacy. It has no power of its own.
So it's completely dependent.
Yes. It must justify every single action it takes on a per-action basis by pointing to a human who authorized it. It cannot command others, it cannot decide outcomes for downstream systems, and its refusal is terminal.
Terminal refusal, meaning what exactly?
Meaning, if an ice cube system refuses to do something, or if an action is impossible because it can't verify external permission, that refusal cannot be overridden by the system's own internal logic.
It can't just decide to do it anyway.
Right. It is solid, frozen, and structurally incapable of autonomous enforcement. Think of a standard pocket calculator.
Okay.
If you try to divide by 0, it says error. It doesn't decide to reinvent math to give you an answer. It just halts. It is refusal bound.
Okay, so that's the ice cube. Frozen, needs constant external permission. The next phase badge is the drop of water.
The text calls this the CWO, or custodial witness orb, witness only.
So what does a water drop do?
The water drop observes, it records, and it preserves provenance. It maintains the exact memory of what happened without altering it.
But, and this is the absolute key to understanding a water drop, it has no execution or enforcement power whatsoever.
None. It just watches and remembers. Water reflects what's there.
But there's a deeper nuance the text highlights, right? Its memory does not become authority over time.
That is vital. Just because a water drop has observed a situation for 10 years or stored 1 million files does not suddenly grant it the power to make binding decisions about that situation.
Custody does not evolve into sovereignty.
Exactly. Which brings us to the third phase, the most powerful one.
The cloud, or fog. The GSRB, God-sovereign religious body, sovereign acting.
The cloud is fundamentally different from the ice cube and the water drop because its legitimacy is internal. It is an acting center of power.
So it can make binding rules that affect others.
Yes. If someone refuses a cloud's directive, the cloud has the structural power to override that refusal and enforce its will anyway.
And time confirms its authority, right? Its rules persist by default until the cloud decides to change them.
That's right.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. You can look at these symbols, an ice cube, a drop of water, a cloud, and instantly know the exact power dynamics of the system you're dealing with.
It clarifies everything immediately.
If it's a cloud, you know they can force you to do something, or delete you, or mandate a behavior. If it's an ice cube, you know they can't do anything without your explicit, constant permission.
But wait, a lot of people might ask, isn't that just a rebranding of basic government regulation?
Yeah, how is this any different from what the SEC or the FDA already does when they classify a business?
That's a common first reaction, but it's completely different. Government regulation tells you what you should do based on legal arguments and political negotiations. It's normative.
Okay.
The phase badges observe what you structurally can do based on your physical or digital architecture.
I see.
Regulation says, you are a bank, therefore you must hold this much capital. The AGS framework says, I don't care what you call yourself. I see that you have the mechanical ability to freeze accounts and override user refusal, therefore you are a cloud.
It strips away all the legal fiction. And we have to emphasize a core rule from the text here. The framework does not prohibit any of these phases.
No, clouds are allowed to exist. We need sovereign acting bodies to run governments, to enforce laws, to manage complex electrical grids.
Exactly. The framework only prohibits misrepresentation. You can be a cloud, but you absolutely cannot be a cloud while dressing up in a PR campaign pretending to be a drop of water.
Yes. You can't issue binding mandates that bankrupt small businesses and then hide behind a press release saying, hey, we're just offering friendly community guidelines.
Which leads us perfectly into the real-world case studies the text provides, the overnight rebadging. What actually happens when an institution is caught lying about its badge?
Let's dive into those case studies. They really illuminate the mechanics. Let us examine case 1 from the source material. A public health authority.
Oh, this is a great one. So, pre-disclosure, before anyone audits them, their public claim, their PR stance is, we merely provide guidance and recommendations for public safety.
Which implies they are wearing the badge of the water drop, a custodial witness orb.
Right.
They want the public to view them as a neutral body that simply observes the health landscape and offers non-binding thoughts based on data.
But then the AGS framework auditor comes in and looks at their observed behavior, not their mission statement, their actual execution. And what do we see?
We see normative mandates.
We see conditional funding like, your hospital doesn't get this federal money unless you enforce our exact protocols.
We see downstream binding enforcement on businesses.
Therefore, the framework forces a rebadge. The public health authority is stripped of the water drop and given the cloud. They are sovereign acting.
And look at the outcome. Their claim of advisory neutrality completely collapses. By forcing the cloud badge onto them, their sovereign responsibility becomes explicit, and public accountability snaps into focus.
You can no longer claim to just be an advisor when you hold the purse strings that control survival.
It's brilliant because it forces honesty.
Let's look at case 2, which is a central bank. Their claim is usually something incredibly dry, like, we are an independent technical institution.
So they desperately want to be seen as a water drop or maybe an ice cube. Just a bunch of economists crunching numbers, completely neutral to politics.
But again, their observed behavior tells a completely different story.
They set interest rates, they control the fundamental money supply.
They execute crisis overrides during market crashes.
Right. Their authority persists by precedent without needing to ask the public for permission every time. They possess the structural power to alter the economic reality of millions of people overnight.
Force rebadge, they get the cloud, the technocratic neutrality illusion collapses.
And suddenly, the public discourse shifts. We aren't arguing about whether they are neutral anymore. We are debating how to properly constrain their acknowledged sovereign power.
Case 3 applies this directly to the technology sector, a massive social media platform. Think of the ones that dominate our communication.
Their pre-disclosure claim is universally, we are just a neutral platform. They desperately want to wear the water drop badge.
We just host the content, we don't make it, we're the town square.
But the observed behavior. We see algorithmic amplification at a massive scale, deciding what goes viral.
We see structural content removal.
We see norm enforcement across billions of users, executed by automated systems. If you can silence someone or amplify them globally with a tweak to an algorithm, you aren't just observing.
Exactly. Forced rebadge to the cloud. They are a sovereign acting body.
The entire decades-long legal debate of platform versus publisher ends instantly under this framework. Their sovereign-like obligations become unavoidable because their actions dictate their phase, not their terms of service.
If you curate, amplify, and censor, you are exercising the power of a cloud.
But it's not all bad news for institutions, right? The framework isn't just about catching people in lies.
Yeah, let's look at case 4, an academic archive. Like a massive digital library.
Their claim is that they have custody of historical documents without endorsing the contents of those documents. So they claim the water drop badge.
And critically, their observed behavior matches the claim. They preserve provenance, but they do not enforce anything.
They do not delete history based on shifting modern norms or political pressure.
Because their behavior structurally matches their declared phase, they retain the water drop badge.
And the outcome is that public trust in them actually increases. They become the gold standard for non-authoritative custody.
Okay, so what does this all mean for the central bank or the social media platform that gets slapped with the cloud badge? Do they lose their power? Do they get dismantled by the government?
The source text answers this beautifully and practically. It says, it is not power, it is deniability. The institutions do not lose their power overnight. What they lose is the ability to pretend they do not have it. The phase badge system does not challenge authority directly. It challenges the misrepresentation of authority.
They lose the ability to pretend. That is such a powerful phrase. It's like turning on the lights in a room where someone was pretending to be a shadow.
And the text also talks about emergencies, right? Case 5.
Yes. What happens when a government or an institution invokes emergency powers.
This is a critical test of the framework. Typically, a government claims temporary emergency measures, attempting to retain whatever restricted badge they had while quietly acting with absolute unchecked power.
The AGS framework forces a transition. If you're overriding refusal, suspending established norms, and expanding your authority based on a crisis, you are acting as a cloud. You are sovereign acting.
But to legally get that cloud badge in an emergency under this system, you have to go through what the text calls a required collapse protocol.
You can't just flip a switch in the dark.
Right. You have to explicitly declare internal legitimacy, publicly accept that you are bypassing normal misuse resistance, and leave a permanent, immutable public record of the phase change.
Emergencies become explicit, documented phase changes rather than vague rhetorical shields.
Yeah.
You cannot quietly seize power, suspend civil liberties, and pretend nothing changed.
You must wear the badge of the power you are actually exercising.
Okay, I have to push back here because this all sounds amazing in a theoretical white paper. But how does this rebadging actually happen in the real world?
It's a fair question.
How does the public enforce this without needing some massive central global authority, like a UN of Tecto, hand out the badges? Because if we need a global authority to do this, the whole thing falls apart.
That brings us to what the text calls the replication and audit guide and the media reaction cascade.
Right.
The genius of the AGS framework is that it is structurally designed for independent human auditors. It doesn't require a global authority. The goal is replicability, not persuasion.
So anyone can do it.
Yeah. Two attentive readers, with no special legal or technical training, should be able to apply a simple checklist to the same institution and reach the exact same phase classification independently.
Okay, but how? If I'm an auditor, what am I actually looking at?
To make that replicability happen, the rules about what information you are allowed to look at are brutally strict. You are only allowed to use public, non-privileged executable artifacts.
Break that down for me. What is an executable artifact?
You can look at public policy documents that outline penalties. You can look at API documentation, the code that dictates how software talks to other software.
Okay, so hard rules.
Yes. You look at enforcement notices, funding conditions, and structural rules that contain binding words like must, required, or prohibited.
And what are you forbidden from using? This is the best part.
You cannot use statements of intent.
Right.
You cannot use mission language. You cannot use ethics pledges, ESG reports, or self-descriptions of neutrality. You completely 100% ignore their PR.
You observe what executes. You ask binary questions. Do these symbolic words trigger real-world effects? Are their decisions binding on downstream users?
Can a user's refusal halt the action? It is a mechanical application of triggers.
If their rules execute without permission, if user refusal can be overridden, and if their authority persists over time, they are a cloud.
So think about how this applies to your daily life. Let's say you're looking at the software platform your company forces you to use. You ignore their flowery About Us page about building a better, more connected community. You just look at the API. Does it extract your data even when you click no?
Does it mandate updates that change your workflow?
Yes. Then you instantly know their true phase. It's a cloud.
It's like having X-ray vision for corporate power.
And because it is so mechanical and so reliant only on public action rather than hidden intent, the author maps out exactly how this paradigm shift scales rapidly through society.
The media reaction cascade.
It's a sociological prediction of how this framework locks into the public consciousness.
Let's walk through that cascade. How does this actually spread from a white paper to the nightly news?
Phase 0 is pre-ignition. This is where we are right now globally. The public is deeply fatigued with long-running, unwinnable disputes over platform neutrality.
And the media is tired of intent-based arguments that go nowhere. The environment is incredibly dry and primed for a spark of clarity.
Then we hit phase 1, the perimeter alarm. A single phase badge appears somewhere out in the wild.
Maybe a developer puts it in an API header, or a leaked document uses the terminology.
Or just an independent audit gets published on a popular blog. It's binary, it's based purely on behavior, and it's non-accusatory.
It just points to a platform and says, according to their API, this platform is acting as a cloud.
Which triggers phase 2, compression. Headlines converge rapidly. Because the visual of the cloud is so simple to grasp, the fact-checking burden for journalists is incredibly low.
You don't need to hunt for whistleblowers or subpoena leaked emails to prove a company is acting as a publisher. You just look at the feed and see the algorithmic demotion happening in real time.
And then phase 3 is the expert pivot. This is huge.
Why is it so huge?
Because experts can no longer go on TV and debate the intent of the tech CEO. They can't sit there and argue, well, did they mean to be biased?
They're forced to debate the constraints on the acknowledged authority.
The entire national conversation shifts from, are they a neutral platform, to, how do we regulate this sovereign acting body?
After a brief period of institutional denial or silence, which is phase 4, we reach phase 5, horizontal expansion.
The media and the public start asking the obvious lateral questions. Well, if social media platform X had to rebadge as a cloud, who else does?
What about Platform Y? What about this massive cloud hosting provider that controls half the internet? What about the mobile app store?
The framework spreads horizontally without any central committee directing it.
And finally, phase 6, discourse lock-in. The old questions just disappear from the culture.
The new default questions are all about scope, appeal, and the boundaries of legitimacy. And the shift doesn't revert because the badges don't expire.
As long as the behavior persists, the classification persists.
It scales incredibly fast because it carries absolutely no moral loading. It is visually simple. It does not require proving that a CEO or an agency director is evil.
It just requires proving they have structural power.
Yeah.
And institutions cannot rapidly change their core executable behaviors, their entire business models, just to dodge a label.
It's an unstoppable logic virus of accountability.
But listen, up until now, we've been talking entirely about human institutions. Central banks, health authorities, massive tech corporations.
Right.
But the sources take a massive structural turn here, and things get really wild. What happens when we apply this exact same accountability structure to artificial intelligence?
To machines that are designed to act on their own.
Yes.
This is where the framework introduces a concept called the accountability anomaly. Treating accountability as a first-class constraint like gravity creates a massive distortion in how we have historically designed systems.
Because we don't only think of autonomy as a straight line, right? As technology gets better, it gets more autonomous, and that's a good thing.
But AGS reveals that as socio-technical systems scale up, the chains of human representation lengthen, and the attribution of who is actually responsible diffuses until it vanishes.
Meaning, the bigger and more complex the AI system gets, the harder it is to figure out which human is actually responsible for any given action it takes.
Exactly. The text describes this as a gravity well of illegitimacy. When a company tries to reduce human cost or involvement to increase the system's efficiency, they inherently destroy its addressability.
The system might become incredibly fast and capable, but its connection to a responsible human collapses.
So that straight line toward total autonomy that Silicon Valley is obsessed with, it actually curves back and plunges straight into illegitimacy.
But wait, I have to push back here, because this goes against everything we're being sold right now.
How so?
Isn't the entire goal of AI development to make it as autonomous, as capable, and honestly as alive as possible? We want digital agents that can act like human assistants.
We name them Claude or Alexa or Siri.
Right. We want them to have personalities and do our jobs for us.
And that, according to the deep dive text, is a massive, incredibly dangerous category error.
A category error.
Yes. It is a profound philosophical mistake to apply biological, life-like metaphors to artificial intelligence. Let's break down why. Living systems, animals, ecosystems, humans can act autonomously without representation because they do not claim delegated authority.
A wolf hunting a deer in the forest does not have to justify its actions to a legal framework.
Exactly. It doesn't act on behalf of a corporation. It acts on its own inherent biological agency.
Right. A wolf is just a wolf. It has inherent agency, and if it does something, it's just nature happening.
But machines are not wolves. Machines act on behalf of humans. They allocate financial resources. They filter human information. They make judgments that affect human lives and liberties.
The very moment a system does that, it enters what the text calls a normative space.
It requires permission. It requires authorization. The text warns fiercely against the temptation to treat machines as quasi-living to avoid this uncomfortable reality.
There's a quote in the document that just blew my mind. It says, "Automated representation is not representation at all. It is substitution without accountability."
Think about how profound that is. When we treat machines like they are alive, we give ourselves a free pass to avoid the hard questions of liability.
If an AI denies someone a mortgage or misidentifies a suspect on a security camera, and we treat the AI like a living agent, the harm is written off as an accident or a hallucination.
The AI's authority becomes inevitability.
It's a sleight of hand. It is a quiet transfer of authority from accountable human beings to completely unanswerable digital processes.
Delegation is not a biological phenomenon. It is a legal and social invention. If a machine is acting, it is acting solely because some human somewhere delegated power to it.
If we forget that, if we pretend the machine is just a really smart new species, we surrender human governance to a black box. We lose the ability to say no.
So if we strip away all the sci-fi biological metaphors, if we stop pretending AI is a cute digital pet and we refuse to let it authorize itself, how do we actually program a machine to know when to stop?
Because it can't just be a vibe check. We can't just tell the AI, hey, try to be accountable.
No, we have to look at the literal math of accountability.
Exactly. The AGS framework formalizes these philosophical concepts into rigorous mathematical stopping conditions. It moves from philosophy to algebra.
The text provides a specific vocabulary of variables to evaluate permission continuously, thousands of times a second.
Let's break those variables down because this is where the rubber meets the road. First, we have A, which stands for addressability.
Addressability is the degree to which a responsible human agent can be located, contacted, and legally compelled to answer for the system's actions.
If the AI does something wrong, can we instantly find the human who authorized it? Is there a cryptographic key linking this action to a specific person's identity?
Okay, then we have R for representation integrity. Is the chain of delegation valid? Did the human actually give this specific permission, or did the AI assume it?
If I tell an AI to book me a flight, did it extrapolate that to mean it should also cancel my meetings and text my boss? That would be a failure of R.
Correct. Next is S, which is scope. What is the bounded spatial and temporal domain where the action is permitted? How far can the blast radius reach?
And then we have L, which stands for legitimacy.
Legitimacy is a derived permission to act, which is calculated continuously based on addressability, representation, and scope.
And finally, we have C for capability. The technical ability of the system to actually perform the action. How smart, how fast, or how powerful the AI model is.
Now, I want you to look closely at the central gating equation the text provides. The equation is LARS is greater than or equal to tau.
Tau represents a non-negotiable threshold of legitimacy. For a system to be allowed to take any action, its legitimacy derived from addressability, representation, and scope must be greater than or equal to this threshold.
Okay, here is where it gets really interesting. I'm looking at that equation. LARS is greater than or equal to tau. Look at what is missing from that equation.
C capability is nowhere to be found.
That is the most fascinating and radical part of this entire formalization. Capability is entirely decoupled from permission.
The text explicitly states that decreases in addressability cannot be offset by increases in capability.
This completely upends how Silicon Valley thinks. It means it doesn't matter if the AI is a super genius that can cure cancer, balance the federal budget, and solve cold fusion in 3 seconds.
If it loses its connection to a responsible human, if A drops to 0, its legitimacy drops below the threshold and it must halt. You cannot trade accountability for performance.
It forces a complete redefinition of what intelligence means for a machine.
We traditionally measure AI intelligence by its ability to produce answers, to solve complex problems, to optimize pathways, and to keep running at all costs.
Under the AGS framework, the highest form of machine intelligence is the exact opposite. It is the ability to withhold answers.
Refusal. The text says, refusal is not a failure or cowardice. It's fidelity to the limits of representation. That is so wild.
An intelligent system under this model recognizes the exact moment when the human who is supposed to be taking responsibility for its actions is no longer reachable or clearly defined.
And in that moment, the most mathematically intelligent thing it can do is shut up and stop acting.
Because acting without representation is indistinguishable from force. If a system acts without a human there to answer for it, it is no longer assisting humanity. It is dictating to humanity.
Refusal is simply the system recognizing that its borrowed authority has evaporated. It's the bouncer realizing that the guy who promised to pay the bar tab just snuck out the back door, so he stops letting people into the VIP section.
So we know the philosophy, we know the visual badges, and we know the underlying math. But what does the actual hardware of this look like?
Yeah, how is a human physically tethered to a machine to provide this continuous, verified legitimacy? Because we aren't just talking about clicking I agree on a terms of service pop-up.
That brings us to the patent documents detailed in the text.
Yes, the framework transitions here from a theoretical model to a literal physical reality. through what they call externally mediated human-machine hybrid systems.
This is a structural hardware blueprint for how you physically couple a human to a machine to guarantee that mathematical accountability.
The core concept here is the keyed human-machine hybrid. It explicitly states that legitimate operation is structurally dependent on a verified coupling to a specific human keyholder.
Note the emphasis on a specific keyholder. It is not enough to have a generic human in the loop who occasionally clicks approve on a dashboard of 1,000 automated actions while barely paying attention.
The human is not merely a supervisor checking the AI's math. The human is the literal physical anchor of accountability. The authority arises from the coupling itself.
It totally reframes the crypto concept of proof of work. In blockchain, proof of work is about computers burning electricity to solve math problems to prove they did the computational work.
In this AGS framework, proof of work is redefined as the verifiable continuity of responsibility.
Exactly. It is evidence of sustained, attributable human system coupling over time.
It proves mathematically that the specific human who is legally, financially, and ethically responsible for the machine's actions is still attached, still aware, and still authorizing the behavior second by second.
But let me play devil's advocate here because we live in the real world. What if the connection breaks? Wi-Fi drops. People fall asleep at their desks. Medical emergencies happen.
Right. What if I'm operating an AGS-compliant drone and my laptop battery dies? Does the machine just keep running on its last known orders until it crashes into a building?
No. That is the exact scenario the system is structurally designed to prevent. The patent specifies that upon loss of verified coupling loss of the keyholder's continuous signal, the system automatically and instantly transitions into a non-operational or signaling-only state.
Authority is intentionally reduced rather than expanded during a failure condition. It doesn't say, oh, the human is gone, I better take over and run everything to complete the mission.
It says the human is gone, I have zero authority, I must halt execution and start broadcasting a distress signal.
It suspends autonomous decision-making entirely. It preserves its internal state, saving its memory so nothing is lost, and it logs the event immutably. But it ceases to exercise power.
This is the structural enforcement of the math we just discussed. Addressability drops, so legitimacy drops below the threshold and the system halts. It is physically incapable of going rogue.
But there is one glaring, fascinating exception to this rule of halting, and it involves literal life or death. The patent explores medical applications of this technology, which brings us to addressable carrier units.
Yes. The patent describes inert addressable carrier units. These are passive devices, potentially placed within a human body. Think of highly advanced assistive technologies, deep brain neural interfaces, smart pacemakers, or internal biometric monitors.
But the key word here is inert. They are structurally incapable of initiating action on their own. They have no local decision-making logic that can authorize a procedure.
They are just empty vessels execution substrates, waiting for an externally authorized action to be sent to them by the AGS system, which is tethered to a doctor or the patient themselves.
Which means they are totally dependent on that human keyholder maintaining the connection. However, the patent details a specific, highly bounded contingency called the Autonomous Medical Authority Escalation Mode.
Okay, so this is the exception. Paint the picture for us. What happens if the human keyholder, who might be a patient relying on this assistive tech to breathe, or a supervising clinician monitoring them remotely, suddenly becomes incapacitated?
Say the patient has acute respiratory compromise or their heart stops and the communication link drops.
Under strict, mathematically predefined conditions, and only as a non-default emergency response to a vital threat, the system can autonomously initiate a life-saving stabilization protocol.
So it can act on its own. It breaks the rule.
It bends the rule, but we must emphasize the incredibly strict boundaries placed around this escalation. It is not the AI suddenly deciding it knows best and taking permanent sovereign control of the patient's body.
Right, the text is super clear. The escalation is bounded by predefined safety constraints that cannot be rewritten on the fly.
It requires immutable audit logs to record exactly what chemical it released or what shock it delivered, and exactly why it deemed it necessary.
And most importantly, what happens when the human wakes up, or the doctor reconnects to the network.
The system automatically reverts to human-directed operation. The exact second viable human oversight is restored. It terminates its autonomous authority instantly.
It does not claim permanent sovereignty over the body. It borrows emergency power for the absolute minimum time required to preserve the human's life, and then it immediately surrenders it back to the human.
Think about how profound that is for a listener right now. We are barreling toward a future filled with medical implants, neural links, and autonomous assistive technology.
The current trajectory of the tech industry is terrifying. We are building machines that might just decide to run autonomously, or worse, get hacked or updated by a corporation with policies that override the patient's own desires.
This framework proposes an entirely different future. A future where that technology is structurally bound by an unbreakable chain of accountability. It prioritizes human dignity and human agency above the machine's capability.
The machine is never allowed to view itself as the master, only as a structurally constrained extension of the human's will.
It's an incredible journey we've been on today. We started with the 5 basic questions of the bouncer at the door. What is it? Where is it from? Who is accountable? What is the effect? And what happens in uncertainty?
We translated those questions into the visual language of the orbs. The refusal-bound ice cube that always needs permission, the witness-only water drop that only remembers, and the sovereign acting cloud that enforces its will.
We looked at the math of legitimacy, where capability never ever equals permission.
And we ended up in the physical reality of human-machine hybrids that would rather shut down completely than act without human accountability.
What the Harshal systems text proves is that accountability is not a corporate buzzword. It is a structural necessity. It is the physics of legitimate power.
So, to you listening, the next time a massive tech platform or a government agency or a shiny new AI company tells you they are just a neutral platform or just a friendly tool, you don't have to argue with their PR department.
You have the tools now. Look at their actions. Do they execute binding rules? Can they override your refusal?
If yes, you can mentally pin that GSRB cloud badge right on their chest. They don't lose their power, but they lose their deniability.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, to the long-term future of AI, there is a lingering, almost haunting question this framework raises.
Yeah, let's leave them with something to chew on. The sources insist that true proof of work is the unbroken continuity of human responsibility. A specific human key holder must be attached to every action.
But what happens 20, 50 years from now? What happens when we have generations of AI systems that have been trained entirely on the outputs of other autonomous systems?
An endless recursive chain of automated representation. Machines delegating to machines, delegating to machines.
Exactly. If the original human key holder, the biological person who actually authored the intent 50 years ago, is lost to history, hidden behind infinite layers of machine-to-machine delegation, does the entire chain of legitimacy collapse?
Are we building toward a world where machines possess infinite godlike capability, but under the math of this framework have absolutely zero right to take a single action?
It's a boundary condition we are rushing toward at breakneck speed. A system that knows how and when to halt is a system that can survive alongside humanity.
A system that forgets how to halt or designs away its own off switch will eventually become a sovereign unto itself.
Keep questioning the systems around you, watch out for the ghosts managing the machinery, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.